Bonjour, je suis brillant.
No.
If you're watching this, you're in my social studies class. And if you're not, well, I think it's time for you to learn about angry French people.
Well, what are you then? I'm French. Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
Welcome to Buff Social Studies. Enjoy. Ah, the good old days before the French Revolution, where we had the biggest polarization of society until some guy that had an industrial Cheeto duster spilt onto him got elected. After the 7 Years' War, France had a debt problem. The solution? Let's tax the ever-living shit out of the people at the bottom, creating a fairly big problem when you don't do the same for the people that have all kinds of money. But that was only the start of the problems, as King Louis XVI had absolute power, which means to have total control over the country and the people inside, with nobody telling you, hey, what's going on here, what? On top of the bad situations for the baguette boys, the monarch and his wife weren't very concerned about the country's poor conditions, but rather what color the marble is on their new foyer floor. Obviously, this meant they struggled to solve literally anything. While they lived in their great estate, the third estate was getting restless. What is the third estate, you ask? Or didn't? Quiet, please. Back then, estates were used to categorize a certain class of people, divided into three: first, second, and third. The first estate is the king and the royal family. They take up 1% of the population, but own 20% of the land. The second estate are mostly nobility and the church, because apparently believing in a god screwing you over all the time is helpful. They take up 2% of the population, and have a whole lot of privilege, like reduced taxes. Coming into third class, hope you're hungry, cause if you aren't, you're not from here. The third estate takes up 97% of the population, consisting of serfs, doctors, lawyers, and merchants. They also have no privilege, are taxed a lot, and have no voice on political issues. Yikes. As you can tell, the state of France has declined massively over the years. The third estate are getting fed up, mostly because the middle class was growing exponentially, making life even more uncomfortable at the bottom. Ineffective leading was becoming extremely toxic to the nation. Many people in the third estate started to diverge from the king's mindset. France is still in debt from earlier. After the 7 Years' War, France had a debt problem, and is now funding the American Independence War, which is on the level of Trudeau giving away money to Saudi Arabia to fix their country, when many of the First Nations land reserves don't have clean drinking water. Now, running back to the topic, like King Louis runs away from the problems he causes. Anyway, King Louis calls an estate general. An estate general is like a family meeting, but with a country. And one of these meetings hasn't been called in over 177 years. Just to put in perspective how bad this guy is at ruling a country. At the estate general, the first and second estate lock out the third estate from being able to come into the birthday party sleepover. This makes Timothy, thy second of thy first of the third, very mad, and has the sudden urge to go play some tennis. The tennis court oath. The angry third estate go and congregate, ooh, big word on a tennis court, and they swear an oath against the king and the people at the top, and they make the
National Assembly.
After this point, the third estate renamed themselves to the National Assembly. The National Assembly are just a group for the people, and try to protect and give people fair rights, with the aristocrats and others living on some place that isn't a small ball of hay and mud. fall of Bastille is one of the biggest monuments of French history. What happened? On June 17th, 1789, 600 people stormed the Bastille. Why? It was transformed from a castle to a place where the king held people for speaking against him, and is not very good leadership. After completely destroying the castle and trying to free the people inside, they saved 7 people. This was the National Assembly's Bill of Rights for the Third Estate, and gave the French population freedom of speech, being able to practice whatever religion you wanted, but women aren't exactly free yet. Just another 129 years. Yeah, sorry about the confusion. The civil constitution of clergy was the Middle Age patch notes during the French Revolution, taking away privileges from the church that allowed them to get away with things that others couldn't, while adding more rights to the people in the Third Estate, making things more even in the long run for everyone. To avoid responsibility, like many people that haven't grown out of being a child, the royal family decides to flee. King Louis and Mary decide to leave for Austria, where Mary's brother was emperor at the time, but caught in the act due to their grandiose lifestyle, trying to leave with, of course, all the unnecessary items and a luxurious carriage. After being caught fleeing the country, King Louis was taken to the National Convention. Who is the National Convention? In short terms, they're a governing body of the National Assembly that made convictions of criminals against the National Assembly. But speaking of convictions, King Louis was convicted of conspiracy against the liberty of the nation. Oh yeah, I'm smart. Look at me. Some big words right there. Okay, liberty means freedom, and that's why Lady Liberty is called Lady Liberty, for the freedom aspect of it. And conspiring against the liberty of the nation is taking away the freedom of the nation. On January 21st, 1793, King Louis was decapitated. King Louis helped design the guillotine. Originally, the guillotine was to have a straight blade. His constructive criticism of the execution device was to make the blade diagonal, making it more of a slicing motion while connecting with the poor sucker stuck in there with his head. After the fall of the king, the former leader of the revolution, Maximilien Robespierre, took over, and that all the French population had been fighting for went straight back to what it was. Robespierre went on a rampage, causing the deaths of 17,000 people. Because if you didn't have full belief in the revolution, you were considered a traitor. Like when you accidentally tell your friend's crush that they like them.
Got a craving for juicy burgers?
After the death of Robespierre, 5 guys were picked to rule France. Formerly known as the Directory, they weren't really good at ruling France, like most of the rulers at the time. But then, apparently, a short little man came back from the island he was banished to. Everything still didn't work out as planned for anybody in the French country. Yikes. So, thank you for being patient while you learned about some les gars français. I don't know how to speak French. I've been lying to you and myself